Greetings, Exile. Has your sanity ever been questioned by a certain lady in red?
Good to see you. Still sane, Godslayer.
Do you get cold sweat each time you ask yourself, are you still sane? What if I'm not sane? I don't know, I haven't been outside in over a year, haven't even checked Reddit in a couple of years. Are those signs of a person going insane? Truly scary thought. But I'm here to calm everyone down and prove that we, exiles, were always sane. Until now. You see, there is this new body armor that allows us to go insane with a press of a button and switch back to Saiyan. That's Super Saiyan. I mean, switch back to sane anytime you want. So I decided to abandon my sanity and make an insane build with cast on crit. Insane. No, I like being monetized. First, quickly about this Doppelganger Guise body armor. It grants level 20 unhinged skill, which on itself does nothing, it is just a fancy name for a button to switch between sane and insane. It works like an aura with no mana reservation or like a toggle on or off. By default it is off and you are sane, friendly, god-slaying exile. When you turn it on, you become insane but without checking Reddit. This also proves that we were always sane by default. While insane, you get a buff to critical strike chance, which is multiplicative with all the other critical strike chances, so it is very easy to reach 100% critical strike chance. You also popcorn all enemies and destroy their remainings without leaving any trace of your insanity. 3D art of this body armor changes when switching between sane and insane, although you're probably not going to ever notice that during fights. Personally, I was more interested in doing build with sane buffs, especially with Inquisitor and his Pious Path node and giving insane life and ES sustain, but maybe I'll leave that for some other build. I haven't played cast on crit build in ages, and usually the problem I have when doing cast on crit build is you need to raise your critical strike chance for attacks, which don't really do much damage, and raise critical strike chance for spells. We have Elder Body Armor for increasing base attack critical strike chance, Shaper's Body Armor for base spell crit, Hunters for both attack and spell based crit, but this one is much more expensive. Besides, when people ask what you are wearing, you can just say I'm insane, and they will leave you alone. Cool party trick to social distance yourself from social life. Now about this insane cast on grid build, I decided to pick Spectral Throw and Blazing Salvo mainly because Blazing Salvo looks super cool when firing a bunch of missile looking projectiles at distant targets, and Spectral Throw works well for providing like multiple hits with one attack. You could probably use some other skill like Lancing Steel or even above skill, but I also wanted to check how Spectral Throw increased hitbox feels like, and it feels alright, can't really actually tell a difference. So, on paper numbers looked really weak, like less than 40,000 average hit with Blazing Salvo. However, in practice it works much better than I expected. Defeated Awakening 7 Sirius rather smoothly, but his guidance and in general targets that move a lot are a bit annoying to deal with. I think I will be trying Maven's 10 boss fight with this a bit later. The cool thing about Spectral Throw and Val Spectral Throw is that it is kind of triggering cast and crit passively while you are running away and dodging enemies, and because projectiles return to you, and with Val Spectral Throw we just keep spinning around, which allows you to, well, dodge enemy attacks and while still proccing cast and crit. So I think the strength of this build is map clear and bossing potential is just alright. Of course you could pick some other skills, get better gears, and it would be much better. But even on a rather low budget, map clear is very satisfying and build feels very safe despite not having high defense. Being able to destroy every single enemy is very helpful against porcupine enemies and alike. Also, you can always switch back to sane buff if you need more survivability, like for example while going through labyrinth traps. Like I mentioned, this build feels safe to map with and even tank some bosses like Minotaur, but then all of a sudden, bam, one-shotted, you dead. Now I do have Fortify when I remember to actually trigger it. I do have decent amount of life and energy shield, but I am using Corrupted Soul Keystone. But the Corrupted Soul Keystone actually makes this build more like sustainable in life and ES, because half of the damage bypasses energy shield. So I always take some damage to life and to energy shield unless it's like a pure chaos damage. So it is easier to get more sustain because you can like combine life leech and energy leech and also life regen, which is also gonna affect your ES regen protection as well. And I do have a small cluster jewel node, Surging Vitality, which every 4 seconds regenerates 10% of my life over 1 second. I have 2 of those, so 20% of my life over 1 second every 4 seconds, which is also gonna be turned into ES regen, so my ES sustain is actually very high. Other than that, for defenses I have Immortal Call linked with Arcane Surge and increased duration, mostly for Arcane Surge duration, and a bit of extra tankiness from flasks. Also in the end I decided to not use Valrach's Fire and instead just have Val Spectral Throw, so I could have more damage, but I already have quite a lot of conditional things. And I also wanted to automate as many things as possible, so you could have more damage like if you chose to manually activate some conditions, but I just wanted to have a smooth build, not necessarily a very high end game, which it still could be. So, for the rest of the video I'm gonna talk more in details about the items, skills, links, passive tree. As always, in video description you will find path of building import code with some other short description and information about this build. So I'm gonna go over my items. Now the weapon can be actually very weird, because you want a high base critical strike chance on the weapon, high attack speed, and then the rest for something to affect spells. And you're also probably gonna want the trigger weapon, the trigger craft. Trigger circuit spells when used as skill, and like play Stormbrand with power charge on crit and like Flame Wall to automate more things. A weapon like this, I'm not sure how accessible it would be. It can be Scepter, it can be Dagger, it can be even actually Claw. Claws have life and mana on a hit, which I think it could be very interesting, which only is for attacks, but still. It could be like another defensive layer, and if you're having mana issues could help with that as well. But the claws you would have to craft with spell damage essences. So you would want to roll spell damage, you would probably want to roll critical strike multiplier, and then either attack speed or critical strike chance to raise the base critical strike chance. This, for example, does have very high base attack speed, but the base critical strike chance also doesn't need to be that high, so it may even not go for the high base critical strike chance. Like 8.22 is probably too high, because like I said, it's very easy to get 100% critical strike chance with this. Even on my Spectral Throw I have 100%. Even without power charges it's still 96% effective crit chance without power charges and without diamond flask. So you could probably get some weapon with lower base critical strike chance. Just pick a weapon that has good base critical strike chance, like Twin Claw. Gemini Claw would have higher dex requirements, so if you want like extra life gain on hit, go with the Claw, but otherwise you could go with the Scepters or Daggers. Now Scepters and Daggers can also roll spell damage, like fire damage like this one, fire damage to spells. So it's gonna be much easier because you're not gonna need to use essences to craft spell damage and in general damage. You can also try to get +1 to fire skill gems, but it's gonna be expensive. So I bought this weapon for 10 years. The next weapon was 5 exalts. So I'm not sure how accessible and it's gonna be to get weapons like that. Next, body armor, I'm using Spectral Throw. The level doesn't really matter because you're not really doing damage with it, and you're not getting anything other than base damage, which you don't need because, well, you're not doing damage with the Spectral Throw. You're only using it to trigger cast and crit. So just go with the highest quality because quality gives attack speed. Cast and crit quality also gives attack and spell crit. Greater multiple projectiles, you also want quality because attack speed. Blazing Salvo, the quality gives increased area of effect, and I had people saying that getting more area of effect works very well for single target even. So I do have some investment into area of effect, but not too much. Inspiration lowers the mana cost, increases crit chance. And then elemental focus, because I'm not really applying any elements. Next, the shield. The shield could have been better. I just reused the shield for some previous build. +1 to fire skill gems, life, and then you don't need spell critical strike chance, so you could go with the spell damage. You could get double damage or something more defensive. Gloves also reused from previous build. This build needs quite a lot of accuracy. I guess you could try to multi-mod weapon. I'm not sure how multi-modding would end up being. And craft hits cannot be evaded, then you wouldn't need to worry about accuracy. Or you could go with the Ghostedire shield for hits cannot be evaded and just not worry about accuracy on other items. But I decided to go with accuracy, so I do need a lot of accuracy everywhere I can get. So on the gloves, attack speed, accuracy, life, resistances, whatever else you want. Same on amulet, spell damage also works well. Accuracy again, critical multiplier, life. I decided to anoint Longshot because projectile speed is, I think, needed. Without the projectile speed, it doesn't feel like it has enough reach with Spectral Throw, and it just feels a bit too slow. Longshot works very well because projectile damage affects Blazing Salvo. Projectiles gain damage as they travel further, dealing up to 40% increased damage with hits to targets, so that would also boost the Blazing Salvo at a longer distance. Next, one of the ring is Assassin's Mark on Hit Ring. I managed to craft this myself. I guess we got pretty lucky. Also chilling enemies reliably, so this cold damage also comes in handy. And also because this is Inquisitor and I ignore enemy resistances when I crit, and I always crit. So for that reason actually another ring also got some accuracy reuse from some previous build. Life, some rest, and then minus mana cost, because mana could be a bit of an issue. As you can see, I reserve so much mana. So on the helmet I got a Blizzard Crown, again reused my previous item from my first build, I believe. It adds a lot of flat cold damage to spells and to attacks. So this actually is adding to spells as well. Now your hits treat cold resistance as 10% higher than actual value. That doesn't really matter because Inquisitor ignores resistances. So also went for accuracy, life, resistances, and energy shield is also needed because Corrupted Soul takes 20% of your life and adds that as an extra energy shield. And other than that, I don't really have lots of sources of increasing energy shield. So if you can get like on boots by the way, nothing special, just an overkill amount of resistances, a lot of life, movement speed, but you could go with like energy shield boots. You could also get cooldown and recovery speed boosts, which would allow you to proc more times the cast on crit, I mean. You could go the same with the belt, but I decided to go with the Darkness Enthroned because I already had decent jewels for that. Life, yes, crit multi, flat damage to spells, something like that. As for flask, I'm using Granite. The thing is, you don't need freeze removal because when you're standing on consecrated ground, and you always create consecrated ground when you stand still, you are immune to elemental ailments, so you don't need like ignite removal, you don't need freeze removal, you only need to get bleed removal, and you also need curse removal. And other than that, I'm using Dying Sun because extra projectiles add more like overlap explosions and increase your overall DPS. And then Silver Flask, you kind of need to get the proper amount of reduced charges used to be able to use it twice. And I went with the poison removal because Degen is actually very scary with this build. I do have -9 here resistance. I'm gonna explain a bit in a moment. So the rest of the gems and skills and links. In the weapon, in the trigger weapon, I got Stormbrand linked with power charge on crit. This is not always reliable, but you are gonna be generating power charges on kill, so this is only gonna be useful mostly against the bosses. And then the flame wall to automate it. In the weapon I have cast and damage taken set up, actually quite high level cast and damage taken, linked with Frost Shield, which does give like a shield buffer, which drains energy shield, but that doesn't really matter because you already have a lot of sustain, and this is mostly just to add some extra defensive layer. And then Cold Snap to chill enemies, and also generate frenzy charges. Now that I think about it, I got Skitterbot, so I probably don't need this shield, but guess I couldn't think of anything else to add. And Flame Dash. Now in the shield I got Immortal Call linked with increased duration and Arcane Surge. It also increases Arcane Surge buff effect, and I got it on the left click, so I just don't need to think about it, it activates whenever it is off cooldown. In boots I actually went super hard try mode and using Shield Charge, which I almost never use. Shield Charge with Fortify, since I destroy all the corpses, I can't really use the General Scry plus Vigilant Strike shenanigans to get Fortify. So Shield Charge, Fortify, Culling Strike, and faster attacks to move fast around and also cull enemies. Trying to cull enemies with Shield Charge actually got me killed a couple times. In the gloves I have Precision, Anger, Skitterbots, and Enlighten level 3. Now, because gloves are +1 to socketed AoE gems, it is also boosting my Anger, well all of my auras. But you want to keep your Precision at a low level enough so you don't reserve too much mana. I am using Precision Swatcher's Eye. This was surprisingly cheap. I think I only paid 1 exalt for this. Increase fire damage while affected by anger, and gain a flash charge when you deal critical strike while affected by precision. I believe this has 0.1 second cooldown or something like that, or maybe just 1 second. I can't remember what's the cooldown, but since I'm always critting, this works very well and helps me sustain my flasks in general. So the rest of the passive 3, the Glorious Vanity name of Doryani is what gives you Corrupted Soul. Corrupted Soul is 50% of non-chaos damage by passes, energy shield, and gain 20% of maximum life as extra energy shield. That gives most of the energy shield for me. And also it corrupts all the small ones, and I got pretty lucky and got decent corruptions like spell damage, chance to block spell hits, area damage, some resistances, chaos resistance, even this one. So that's how I'm actually increasing my chaos res. I got these chaos resistance nodes, got these as well. I also am using careful planning to convert intelligence into dexterity, because you do need over 100 dexterity for body armor and for some green gems. I am using cluster jewel. Cluster jewels can be very flexible, I think. I needed life leech, so I went with the Doryani's lessons, but if you're using claw and getting life on hit, probably don't need life leech. You could get away with like energy leech, but I'm getting energy leech from this one. The penetration is actually, well, useless because you are ignoring enemy resistance, but however it's still very good nodes, so I decided to take these. And the medium jewels, I could not figure out what's better to pick for medium jewels, so I went with more AoE and crit multi, area damage, even life, and then surging vitality jewels. Got some dexterity, got accuracy from these nodes and from these nodes. These power charge nodes are very nice. Gives +1 minimum power charge and power charge on kill, and some crit multi crit chance per power charge. As you can see, you can get a lot more life if you feel like. For the Ascendancy, Pious Path is great. It gives a lot of regen, and your life regen adds to the ES regen as well. So if you are regenerating, as you can see, I'm getting up to 1600 life regen because of surging vitality jewels, and that also turns into the same amount of ES regen. That's why Inquisitor Righteous Fire is an actual legit thing. This node obviously for more crit chance, and that to ignore enemy resistances. For leveling, I actually was using at around level 45, I think. I switched to cast and crit build, and I was using for weapon, I was using Morte Morsu Claw, because it does have good base critical strike chance, good attack speed, and also gives a lot of critical strike multiplier, which does affect spells. Otherwise, I mean, it was decent weapon to level with cast and crit since like level 45 and all the way until 68 when I put on the body armor, and even past that, later I got a better weapon. My leveling setup was Tabla, Morte Morsu basically, and other typical usual leveling items like Replica Prism V for more spell damage, and then Onder's Gloves for more attack speed and some accuracy, and 7 League Step Boots. But I was using, for support gems, I was using Spectral Throw, Cast on Crit, Blazing Salvo, Increased Critical Strike Chance, Inspiration, and Greater Multiple Projectiles. So Blazing Salvo was basically only getting Inspiration to boost its damage, and it was actually plenty for leveling. It was actually kind of insane, the damage. It was very unexpected. So yeah, that covers the build. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.